In December of 1900, a lighthouse on a lonely Scottish island went dark. It stood on Eilean Mòr, the largest of the Flannan Isles, far out in the Atlantic, west of the Isle of Lewis. The island was remote, exposed, and almost completely cut off from ordinary life. There were no villages there, no roads, no crowds, only cliffs, wind, seabirds, ruined stone structures, and the white tower of the lighthouse standing above the waves. The lighthouse had been built to protect ships passing through dangerous waters. Its purpose was simple. Every night the light had to shine. If the beam disappeared, sailors could be left blind in one of the most dangerous parts of the Scottish coast. 3 men were assigned to keep that light alive. James Ducat was the principal keeper. Thomas Marshall was the second assistant. Donald McArthur was serving as an occasional keeper, replacing another man who was away because of illness. They were experienced men. They knew the sea, they knew the weather, they knew how dangerous the island could be, and they knew that on a lighthouse station, discipline mattered. The routines were strict. The lamp had to be cleaned, the lens had to be maintained, the machinery had to be checked, weather readings had to be taken, meals had to be prepared, equipment had to be secured, and above all, the light had to burn. But around midnight on December 15th, a passing vessel noticed something strange. The Flannan Isles light was not visible. At first, this did not immediately become a major alarm. Communication in 1900 was slow. The islands were remote. Bad weather could delay ships and reports. The outside world did not yet understand that something had gone terribly wrong. For days, the lighthouse remained silent. No one on shore knew for certain what was happening on Eilean Mòr. Were the keepers injured? Had the light failed? Had a storm damaged the station? Or had something happened that no one could explain? 11 days later, on December 26th, the lighthouse tender Hesperus approached the island. It was supposed to be a normal relief visit. The crew expected to see the keepers waiting. They expected the usual preparations for landing. They expected signs of life. But as the ship came closer, the island seemed strangely still. No flag was raised, no signal came from the lighthouse. No men appeared on the rocks. The captain sounded the horn. Nothing. A rocket was fired to attract attention. Still nothing. For the men aboard the Hesperus, the silence was the first warning. A lighthouse station was not supposed to ignore a relief vessel. If the keepers were alive and able to respond, they should have done so. Relief keeper Joseph Moore was sent ashore. As he climbed toward the lighthouse, he later described a growing sense of dread. He knew the island, he knew the men, and he knew that something was wrong. When Moore reached the station, he found no welcome, no voices, no movement, no one waiting at the door. Inside the lighthouse, the silence was even worse. The keepers were gone. All 3 of them. Not injured, not asleep, not hiding, gone. The lighthouse itself was not destroyed. The lamp was ready. The equipment was in order. The building still stood. But the men who were supposed to keep the light burning had vanished from the island. There were no bodies, no clear signs of a fight, no simple explanation, only a deserted lighthouse, and the Atlantic wind moving around the empty station. Joseph Moore's first search of the lighthouse revealed a scene that was not chaotic enough to explain the fear it created. That may be why the story became so disturbing. If the station had been destroyed, people might have understood. If there had been signs of a violent attack, investigators would have known where to begin. If the men had left a note, there would have been at least one clue. But the lighthouse appeared almost normal. Too normal. The lamp had been cleaned. The oil was ready. The lens and machinery were in proper condition. The work of the morning seemed to have been completed. The kitchen had been tidied. Pots and pans were cleaned. The normal daily duties had been carried out. This suggested that the men had not vanished in the middle of panic. They had worked. They had followed routine. They had prepared the station for another night. Then something happened. Something made them leave the safety of the lighthouse. And after that, none of them returned. The bedrooms were empty. The fire was not lit. The clock had stopped. The outside doors were closed. Everything gave the impression that the station had been abandoned suddenly, but not violently. There was no evidence of a long struggle inside, no clear sign that strangers had entered, no proof that the men had turned against each other. The mystery deepened when the last known written records were examined. The official logbook entries had been made earlier, but weather and station details for the following days had been noted on a slate, ready to be transferred later into the log. This was normal lighthouse practice. It showed that the keepers were still maintaining their routine until the morning of December 15th. That detail matters, because it suggests the men did not disappear over several days. They were almost certainly alive and working on the morning of the 15th. By midnight, when the passing vessel saw no light, something had already happened. The window of disappearance was narrow. Sometime during the afternoon or evening of December 15th, 3 experienced men left the lighthouse and were never seen again. Outside the station, investigators found signs of severe damage near one of the landing areas. Ropes had been disturbed, equipment appeared to have been damaged or displaced. Iron railings had been bent, a heavy box may have been moved by the force of the sea. The western landing area seemed to have been struck by extreme weather. The official investigation would later focus heavily on this detail. Perhaps the keepers had gone down to inspect storm damage. Perhaps they had tried to secure loose equipment. Perhaps one man went first, then the others followed to help. Perhaps a sudden wave rose from the Atlantic and swept all 3 away. It was a logical explanation, but it was not a complete one, because lighthouse rules existed for exactly this kind of danger. The men were not supposed to take unnecessary risks. The island was high, exposed, and dangerous. The sea could rise without warning, and at least one man was usually expected to remain inside the station. So why would all 3 men leave? Why would they go close enough to the sea to be taken? Why was no body ever recovered? And why did the station feel so strangely untouched? Those questions turned a tragic accident into a legend. Long before the lighthouse was built, Eilean Mòr had a reputation. The island was not simply a piece of rock in the Atlantic. It was a place wrapped in old stories. Its name was connected to St. Flannan, an early Irish saint. A small ruined chapel stood on the island. Shepherds and visitors had sometimes come there, but the island was never a comfortable home. Many people considered it lonely. Some considered it sacred. Others considered it unsettling. There were old customs connected to the island. People who visited treated it with caution and respect. There were stories that certain things should not be done there. Voices should be kept low. The place should not be mocked. The dead, the saints, and the sea were all too close. Whether those beliefs were religious, superstitious, or simply the result of isolation, they shaped how people imagined the island. A lighthouse is a rational structure. It is built with engineering, mathematics, and discipline. It exists to fight darkness. But the Flannan Isles Lighthouse stood in a landscape that already carried centuries of mystery. That contrast made the disappearance even more powerful. 3 modern men vanished from a modern station built on an ancient island full of older fears. It was easy for the public to imagine something beyond a normal accident. Some people spoke of ghost ships, others of sea monsters, others of strange forces in the waves. There were tales of the Blue Men of the Minch, supernatural beings from Scottish folklore said to haunt the waters between the islands and the mainland. There were also stories about the island itself, as if Eilean Mòr did not want people to remain there. But the most haunting part of the story did not need monsters. The truth was already strange enough. 3 men disappeared from a lighthouse. The station was found empty. The light had gone out. The bodies were never found, and the sea kept it secret. Over time, later retellings added details that made the case seem even more paranormal. Some stories claimed the lighthouse logbook contained terrifying entries about storms, fear, prayers, and men behaving strangely. These accounts are famous. They are repeated often. But they are not reliable. Many researchers now treat those dramatic logbook entries as later inventions. They may make the story more frightening, but they should not be treated as proven evidence. The real case does not need them. The real documents are already disturbing. The actual mystery is not that the men wrote about supernatural terror. The actual mystery is that they were there. Then they were gone. The lighthouse was ready. The work had been done. The light should have been burning. But it was not. And no one can say with certainty what pulled 3 keepers out of safety and into the darkness. The official explanation was built around the sea. It was the most practical answer. It also fit the island. The Atlantic around the Flannan Isles could be violent. Waves could strike with enormous force. Storms could damage landing areas, tear away equipment, and make solid rock feel unsafe. Investigators believe the men may have gone to inspect or secure equipment near the western landing. This landing was exposed to heavy seas. If a storm had damaged ropes, boxes, or gear, the keepers might have felt responsible for protecting it. A lighthouse station depended on supplies. Landing areas were essential. If equipment was lost, relief operations could become dangerous or impossible. The men may have gone outside because they believed the situation required immediate attention. Maybe one keeper saw damage and went to check it. Maybe he got into trouble. Maybe the others followed. Maybe they believed they had time. Maybe the sea looked dangerous, but not deadly. Then a massive wave came in, a sudden wall of water, a large roller. It struck the rocks, rose higher than expected, and swept the men away before they could escape. If they were pulled into the Atlantic in December, survival would have been almost impossible. Cold water, heavy clothing, rocks, currents, no one nearby to help. In that version, the mystery becomes a tragic accident. No killer, no ghost, no secret plan, just three men doing their work and meeting the most dangerous force on the island. But even this explanation leaves uncomfortable questions. Why would all three go? If one man stayed inside, he could have raised the alarm later. If two went down to the landing, why did the third follow? Why was the risk considered urgent enough to break routine? And if the sea was violent enough to take three men, why was the station itself still so orderly? There is another possibility. Perhaps the men were not careless. Perhaps the sea was simply stronger than anything they expected. Modern research has shown that rogue waves can rise suddenly and violently. They can appear larger than surrounding waves. They can strike with little warning. To people on land, especially near cliffs and landing stages, the sea can seem far away one moment and deadly the next. The keepers may have believed they were safe. They may have stood on ground they had used many times before. They may have been looking at damage, securing ropes, or discussing repairs. Then the wave arrived. The official theory is not impossible. In fact, it is probably the most reasonable explanation. But reasonable does not always mean satisfying. People want an ending. They want bodies. They want a final moment. They want someone to say, this is exactly what happened. The Flannan Isles case refuses to give that answer. It offers only probability, not certainty. And in the space between those two things, legends grow. Whenever a case remains unresolved, alternative theories appear. Some are serious, some are dramatic, some are almost impossible. But each exists because the official explanation leaves gaps. One theory suggests that one of the men may have fallen first, the others may have tried to save him. This is one of the simplest human explanations. Imagine one keeper going down toward the landing. He slips. A wave hits. He is in danger. The others rush to help. In those seconds, training and rules no longer matter. A man is in trouble. Friends and colleagues react. Then another wave comes. All three are gone. This theory explains why all three might have been near the water. It does not require panic. It does not require madness. It only requires loyalty. Another theory is that the men were blown from the cliffs by wind. This was suggested early, but it is less convincing to some researchers. The island was dangerous, but experienced keepers would know how to move in high winds, and being blown away does not explain every sign of damage near the landing. There were also darker theories. Some imagined a fight. Isolation can put pressure on people. Three men living together in a remote station might argue. A disagreement could become violent. One man could kill another. Then panic. Then suicide. Or a second confrontation. But there is no solid evidence for this. The station did not show clear signs of violence. No bodies were found. No confession was possible. The theory survives because the men disappeared, not because the evidence strongly supports it. Another idea is that one of the men went mad. This theory was common in older mystery writing because remote lighthouses were often imagined as psychologically dangerous places. Isolation, storms, sleeplessness, darkness, the endless sound of the sea. But again, there is no proof. The men were trained, they were accustomed to difficult conditions, and the work of the station appears to have been completed properly on the day they vanished. That does not sound like a station collapsing into madness. Then there are the supernatural theories. Ghosts, curses, sea spirits, the blue men of the Minch, the ancient power of Eilean Mòr. These theories are not evidence, but they are part of the story's cultural life. People reach for the supernatural when ordinary explanations feel incomplete, and the Flannan Isles mystery is almost designed for that reaction. A lonely lighthouse, a silent island, a missing crew, a light that failed. No bodies, no final answer. If this happened in a city, it would be a missing persons case. But because it happened on a remote Atlantic island, beside an old chapel and under a dead lighthouse beam, it became something larger. A maritime ghost story, a legend with official records at its centre. Part 6. The silence that remained. After the disappearance, the lighthouse had to keep operating. The sea did not stop because 3 men were gone. Ships still needed the light. New keepers had to take over. The tower had to function. But the station was never the same. Imagine being one of the men left behind after the Hesperus departed. You are on the same island, sleeping in the same rooms, walking the same paths, hearing the same waves. You know that 3 men were here only days before. You know they vanished. You do not know where. You do not know how. And every time the wind rises, you wonder if the answer is outside, on the rocks, at the landing, in the dark water below. Joseph Moore reportedly found the experience deeply unsettling. That is easy to understand. He had expected a normal relief. Instead, he became one of the first people to step into one of the strangest lighthouse mysteries in history. The families of the missing men were left with grief and uncertainty. A death at sea is difficult enough, but a disappearance without a body is different. It leaves the mind searching. Were they taken instantly? Did they suffer? Did one survive for a moment? Did they call out? Did they understand what was happening? Or did the sea erase them before there was time for fear? Those questions were never answered. More than a century later, the Flannan Isles mystery still holds public attention. It has inspired poems, books, documentaries, films, songs, and countless retellings. Some versions are careful, others are exaggerated. Some add false logbook entries and paranormal details. Others remove the folklore and focus only on the official investigation. But the core of the story remains powerful either way. A lighthouse is supposed to mean safety. It is supposed to be a promise, a light in the dark, a human signal against the sea. At Flannan Isles, that promise failed. For one night the light went out, and when help came, the men who kept it burning were gone. The most likely explanation may be simple: a sudden wave, a dangerous landing. After the disappearance, the lighthouse had to keep operating. The sea did not stop because 3 men were gone. Ships still passed through those dangerous waters. The tower still had to shine. The machinery still had to be maintained. The lens still had to be cleaned. And new keepers had to take the place of the men who had vanished. But the station was never the same. Imagine being one of the men left behind after the Hesperus departed. You are standing on the same island, sleeping in the same rooms, walking the same stone paths, hearing the same wind against the walls. Outside, the Atlantic keeps moving in the dark. Below the cliffs, the waves strike the rocks again and again, and you know that only days earlier, 3 men were alive in that same place. They cooked meals there. They wrote in the log. They maintained the light. They looked out at the same sea. Then, sometime during December 15th, 1900, they disappeared. No bodies were found. No final message was left behind. No witness saw the last moments. No one could say exactly where they were standing when the danger came. For the families of James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald McArthur, the pain was not only loss, it was uncertainty. A death at sea is difficult enough, but a disappearance without a body leaves something unfinished. It creates questions that never stop repeating. Did they understand what was happening? Was one man taken first? Did the others rush to save him? Did a wave strike without warning? Did they have time to call for help? Or were they gone in a single moment, swallowed by the Atlantic before anyone could react? Those questions have never been answered. More than a century later, the Flannan Isles mystery still holds public attention. It has inspired books, poems, documentaries, songs, and films. Some versions of the story are careful and factual. Others add strange details, ghostly logbook entries, curses, and supernatural warnings. But even without those legends, the real case is haunting enough. A lighthouse is supposed to mean safety. It is supposed to be a human signal against darkness, a promise to sailors that someone is awake, someone is watching, someone is keeping the light alive. But on the Flannan Isles, that promise failed. For one night the light went dark, and when help finally reached the island, the men who kept it burning were gone. The most reasonable explanation may still be the simplest one: a violent sea, a dangerous landing, a sudden wave, 3 men caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But reasonable does not mean certain, and certainty is what this case refuses to give. The island kept its silence, the sea took the evidence, and the lighthouse continued to stand above both. Today, Eilean Mòr is still there. The cliffs still face the Atlantic. The old chapel still remains. The tower still rises over the empty rocks. And the question has never disappeared. What happened on December 15th, 1900? Why did 3 experienced lighthouse keepers leave the safety of the station? And how did all 3 vanish without leaving a single body behind? Until the sea gives back what it took, the Flannan Isles will remain one of the most haunting mysteries in lighthouse history. 3 men, 1 island, a light that went dark, and a silence that has lasted for more than 100 years.